All right, hopefully this one is now working. Okay, let's first of all check the sound. Hey. All right, let's hear that. I just now tell the other stream where we've gone. So, copy, paste, right. Please, audio be working. Okay, audio is working there. Right, and okay, we are here for this one. I should get rid of the other one. Edit. That's annoying. So if we just give me a second to update the links everywhere, because that's going to be so annoying. And I thought we could get a stream going that wouldn't have technical issues for once. Oh well. Right, Facebook first. So hopefully whoever was here can find it. Yeah. Well, anyway, I always, with these streams, give it kind of like 5-10 minutes anyway before we start, just to give people time to arrive. So that's good in this case, because we're now about to start on time. Right, event, where's the event? Event page, where's the event page? Also, that's now distracting. I can hear myself in double. So that's good to know that I do have audio. But let's discussion. Right, add post. Post, all right, and hopefully anyone else who made. Oh, yeah, we've got a couple more people coming in. That's great. There's no worry in being slightly behind schedule with all of this. Again, hopefully we are all good. Just checking no one else is. Nope, nobody's waiting on the old one. That is good. We've all shifted over. Yeah, more people coming into this one. Excellent. Just getting that. Oh, go away. Go away. One. Couple other places to shift that. Is the audio okay? First of all, I can hear it fine on my end, but I just want to double check with you guys because I always want to make sure, because this isn't, as ever when I live stream, I've explained every time, this isn't my usual setup because, well, first of all, whenever I live stream, it doesn't allow me to use my usual microphone for some reason. It just doesn't register it, so I'm doing this just purely through the webcam itself this time. And copy link, and also different location, because I now, in order to do this, I need to have more set up around here. Yeah, people go there. Yeah. Yes, it's always kind of different, but hopefully this is all working. Oh, what a, oh dear. This is, I don't know what that's now going to do, because what I've accidentally done is I've accidentally shared the studio link, not the actual viewing link. So let's change that so that people can actually access this and don't get a warning of saying this is not where you're supposed to be. Anyway, new book. Yay, new book is out. And it's February. I can hear, please. There we go. That's loading in the right place. I can hear the birds chirping outside, so that's nice. And we'll get on to the main conversation in just a second. Last couple of posts. All right, now let us begin. I was kind of worried because at the moment, recently, well, a few days ago, the internet here started acting weird, and just dropping in and out, and why is that? Book doesn't seem to be working. Why is the book not working? Why is it doing that? Technology is not my friend today, because for whatever reason, it's for whatever reason, I don't see why it would be happening, but phone seems to be auto-correcting in the middle of the Amazon hyperlink, because it's title of the book /DP, whatever that stands for, and then the actual code of the thing itself. And everywhere I've posted the link, it now seems, I'll edit that later, it now shifts it to DO, as in the word do. It's right in the middle of a URL. So I don't know why it would do that, but it has. So that's annoying. But again, we can fix the rest of it later. As I was saying, a few days ago, the internet just decided, oh no, yeah, we're not going to really let you do anything too complex. You can't have multiple things on at the same time throughout the household. So that's annoying. Yesterday or the day before, something like that, we got in contact with BT and said, oh yeah, we can come around and fix that. It's probably just that the router is too old, but it'll be until next Saturday. So, I mean, first of all, either way, I was going to upload a video in between them. So hopefully we're still going to have enough internet for that. But also with this, I don't know how much more extra bandwidth this is going to be taking up. So everything else, bar what I'm using to check that the stream is running, with audio and everything, that's all on airplane mode and stuff like that. And everyone else is in houses not using the internet. Hopefully gives us the most chance. But I was wondering if maybe that's why the previous one wasn't loading. The previous stream, which I can just close now, it's still trying to connect to the streaming software, whereas starting this new one started immediately. But yeah, the first stream I did, I tried to involve more audience participation, and yay, more people. Hello, thank you. I tried to involve audience participation, and ultimately I didn't take into account that not everyone is going to have a YouTube account, so can't interact in the chat. So it's slightly annoying. Second stream, I had the problem I mentioned with the microphone. I had a problem with the microphone, wherein, as I mentioned before, I wasn't hearing audio. So I had to restart again. Let's not this. Either way, we're here now. I have been obviously, understandably, pushed back a little bit. So let's get right into the thing itself. Let's just skip over the main intro. Part of what, and again, I just want to double check. Yep, we still have audio. So we have here the book itself. Obviously, again, yours, if the link works, the descriptions are going to change the links later. Yours won't have the not for resale nor watermark on it because yours is not an also pre-order copy. But yes, we can now get this on Amazon along with Gift of the Manson and The Ark of Angels from the previous 2 books. So what here are little extracts if they're going to show up that we're going to read today. And yeah, let's just forget the opening spiel bit. Let's just get right into our first extract. So I will say, if you have read the first 2 books so far, this here that we can talk about throughout, there's no real way to avoid it. There's going to be a little bit of, it's not exactly a spoiler for book 2, but book 2 leaves off a certain element in a certain way. And this is going to kind of reveal part of how that continues. There's nothing really to do about that. If you haven't read the first 2 books, you have no idea what I'm talking about, so that's fine anyway. But just kind of a spoiler for this own book itself. But obviously when I've chosen these extracts, as ever, these should be bits that are interesting and get you hooked, but also don't give away too much of the main story itself, which we will be talking about and giving an overview of subsequently. But to here. So to just give you a little bit of context of this section, the characters at this point in the book have returned to the present day because when I talked about the marketing of book 2, there's kind of time travel elements in it. And where they found themselves, however, is not where they're used to, but rather they're now hauled up in this kind of old grand abandoned house. They're kind of now adopting into their base of operations. And I'll talk about that a little bit after this first extract reading. And they also have there a load of beings that we met in book 2 called the Namots, who were these kind of artificial beings that were created by the Brethren Lords, kind of like scientific researchers in a hidden base out in the Caribbean. So as we join this section, 2 of the characters, Carrie and Jimmy, are just returning to the house, having explored the surrounding village. And yes, that's where we pick up. Yeah, audio still good. The pair were greeted first by some almost deafening sounds coming from the house's basement upon their return. From the moment they clambered through the hole they'd made in the wall, they could hear little else. They didn't even have the upshot of knowing what it was. Abandoning Jimmy, Carrie found Eve pretty much where they'd left her. Having made a nest for herself out of the assorted items she'd managed to find around the house, the Venezuelan had apparently been trying to piece together a sort of history of the place, examining the remnants of the building's former glory and putting a story to them. The smashed body of an old-fashioned telephone clasped in her hands, Eve didn't hear Carrie approach until the girl cried over the din, "What is making all that racket?" And as ever, just a note, I am not going to be doing differentiated voices, really, especially not accents when we get to characters like Noah, who's American. Startled, her head whipped up, costing her a pain in the neck just to see a friend's annoyed face. Grimacing at the discomfort she'd caused herself, Eve put down the phone so as to free her hands. Having cupped them around her mouth for supposed projection, she yelled back, "It's Tony and the Namods. I don't know what they're doing. They won't let me see." Carrie only caught about half of that. But with Jimmy having gone who knew where in the house, who else was there to talk to? Unless... What about Noah? Not wanting to strain her voice, Eve simply pointed down the corridor. Giving her the beginnings of a nod of appreciation, Carrie strode away, succumbing to the urge to cover her ears as she got closer to the source of the noise. Peering through crumbling doorway after crumbling doorway, Carrie noted not only an absence of Noah in their dank rooms, but also a lack of Namods. But of course, they were probably with that know-it-all in the basement. Hopping over a hole in the floor where the ceiling in the room below had collapsed, she finally came across more voices. Sending the door to her right flying, Noah and Jimmy became visible. The American was slumped against the rusting frame of a bed, his knees tucked up into his chest and his head buried in his hands. Jimmy was stood at his side, incessantly tapping on Noah's shoulder for his attention. He stopped, however, as soon as he saw Carrie. Thinking that the boy must have found another way into this room, for she figured he couldn't have been brave enough to jump that hole, Carrie decided she'd be better directing her attention at Noah, hence commenting, How can you rest in all this?" Noah lifted his head to see why Jimmy had stopped prodding. His weary eyes immediately locked onto the other aggravating youth. "I can't," was all he groaned. "Hey," Jimmy protested, jabbing Noah harder than ever. "Why'd you talk to her but not me?" Positively bellowing, making herself louder than either of the other two to ensure she was heard, Carrie said in a more than judgmental manner, Aren't we meant to not be drawing attention to ourselves? As loud as it sounds in here, Noah suggested, moving himself closer to her. This probably won't reach anyone beyond. Did you hear that? About to make a sarcastic comment along the lines of course I do, Carrie slowly realised that he was actually referring to some hurried footsteps coming towards them. With all of them now staring into the hallway, the dust-covered figure of Tony came stumbling to a halt before them. He additionally... missed a word there. He was additionally covered from head to toe in marks of many kinds and was a strange combination of exhausted and exhilarated. Looking solely at Noah and speaking when he could between pants, Tony reassured them. I've asked the name odds to keep it down. As if on cue, the cacophony did die down slightly, though the metallic and electrical clattering resonating throughout the building was still above what any of them would call acceptable levels. Now not having to shout as much, Tony began, before anyone else could speak first. Okay, so I was never going to keep the secret very long, and as you're all here, I say this should be as good a time as any. Do I have something to show you? Eve hadn't been given an explanation as to why she was being dragged along by Tony towards the basement, surrounded by the entirety of their mismatched group, bar Philip, who was still nowhere near stable to be released. In a flash, she had been pulled up from a collection of rubble and marched away without so much as a how do you do. Her question as to why the din had lessened had gone unanswered, but as it seemed that they were headed in the direction of its origin, she reasoned their silence on the matter wouldn't be much of an issue for long. Down into the lower levels of the building, Tony led them, his excitement only growing with their proximity to the basement. By the time they had reached the room at the bottom of the staircase, Eve could have sworn the boy was going to burst with glee. This, he announced, spinning round to face them, adopting mannerisms commonly associated with the circus ringmaster, is my greatest creation. It is a place where you will soon be able to find the answer to all your technological quandaries and needs. A treasure trove of appliances that shall assist us in our mission. I present to you the subterranean toy box. If he was expecting applause, no, Tony would have to settle for silence. Speaking slowly, as to stress how much she meant this, Carrie remarked over the sounds coming from the toy box, that is the most pretentious thing I have ever heard. Combining a frown and crossed arms, Tony demanded smartly, okay then, you put it better. Actually, on second thought, no. Please don't. Ignoring the glances shared amongst his fellows, Tony ushered them into the basement itself, hoping that seeing would be believing in their case. As soon as the group was over the threshold, they were immediately engulfed in a sea of bustling Naymods, in the midst of which were rebuilt tables. These were topped with a wide variety of objects that were presumably the spoils of Tony's earlier scavenger hunt with their non-human friends. This in addition to the equipment the Naymods had happened to bring with them, now mid-modification, as well as what appeared to be the suits the entities had provided the youths and Noah with for their icy excursion. Onto the ceiling had been attached torches and lamps which successfully illuminated the majority of the room. Here and there, sparks flew up into the air, some landing to scorch what was left of the wallpaper. This was obviously the source of the metallic uproar. Tony hadn't got the Naymods to use subtle methods to do whatever it was they were doing. So far, Tony continued, getting back into his ringmaster rhythm, we've only made 2 breakthroughs. Was one of those the lights? Carrie butted in, unable to stop herself. Glaring at her, for he knew that she would never grow to like this idea of his and would rather belittle him for it, Tony hastily answered before moving on. Yes, but the other one I think is truly a masterstroke. Come with me. I think for time, we'll pause that there to leave you to find out in the book itself what exactly that next masterstroke that they had when with what they were doing in the basement there, building all new sorts of technology and things that they can then use on their subsequent missions throughout the rest of the book itself. So, I mentioned again, ahead of reading that extract, that we are. Yep, that's still audio. So I get really paranoid about this during the stream because last time there was no audio. I mentioned before, obviously, yeah, they're setting up inside this house and they're using it as kind of like a base of operations. This, I think, is, and I've explained this before in the Celestial Coup overview video that I released a couple of weeks ago. So, where I felt the tone shifts from the first two books to these second two books. Wherein, I mean, obviously throughout them, they're still traveling around the world and beyond, but I guess kind of in the first book, you have Philip's home as kind of a hub that he keeps moving back to, but not really, because that's just him. It's not them as a group collaborating there. And indeed, in book 2, that is all basically just traveling. Whereas here, for books 3 and book 4, this house, which, oh God, sounds like that. Whereas usually I would be naming places and things, I have not named this house, and I have not named the village that it's set in, because to me this is a real location. As in, there is an actual real location that I have visited, that I am, in my head, they are there. But whereas I feel like you can be fine mentioning real world locations like the Palace of Westminster, or Ayantapui, the mountain that they visited in Venezuela in the first book, because they're real like public locations. I feel like just naming this random, real small village in England in this book, again, it's not, ideally at some point a number of people will read these books, but even so, even if it's not like massively popular books and everyone's finding out about this thing, I don't want the residents of this village to just suddenly find that they are the setting for these sci-fi adventures. So yeah, they are remaining anonymous. So like, you could superimpose this onto any kind of village if you wanted, but in my mind there is this real place that they are set in. But either way, this village becomes kind of the recurring base for where they go to and from. And because they now have this, and also in conjunction with them having the name mods that they're working with that can kind of give them these advancements and the little tech bits, from here on, they're now more in control of what they're doing. In, let's say, the first book, it was more where Philip happened to be going and ultimately when they followed a lead. In the second book, they just kind of had to keep on moving. From here, they are able to pick and choose their battles, essentially. They can find out these bits of information and say, okay, we are now going to go to this location to try to achieve this goal and then come back here afterwards. So yeah, there's a lot more control. They have more agency in what's going on. And you have more sections consistently in the same location, again, being this house. So tonally, that gives that as well. They'll talk also about tone and stuff in a little bit after a couple of other extracts. But then to discuss the plot itself as well, which is the other thing I said initially that we would talk about here. Always, again, non-spoilery, but to give you that kind of overview. So as I say, we've already returned to the present from the past, which is kind of throughout time that they went to in book 2. However, they've arrived in this house instead, and kind of, this is where they're choosing to haul up for the moment rather than trying to go anywhere else, because at least here is safe, even if they don't really know where they are. Beyond that, they can Google the location to some extent. Just gonna check what that notification is. Okay, bye. Yeah, and there, so they get back in contact with the name mods from book 2 to help them there, and otherwise, the information that they're trying to find relates more to the human agents of the Brethren Lord. So, because I haven't specified in the stream itself, although you will have heard about them if you've either read the early books or seen these streams or videos, you have these otherworldly beings, these immortals, these Brethren Lords, led by Grail Repper, who have been kind of skewing the progression of human evolution throughout our history, such that by the time we get to these books, set in 2016, Earth is near a point where, technologically speaking, it can be used in some mechanisms of theirs that would then tie into their goals for a multiversal conflict that has been going on for eons. It's kind of in a lull at the moment. There's no active fighting between any of the given sides, but the tension still exists. The animosity is still there, and they are looking to take this next step to strike back while no one is suspecting of it, and that involves, again, humanity and Earth. Because the Brethren Lords can't really exist on Earth naturally on their own, there are mechanisms by which they can do it, but it's not the most efficient or convenient. They instead have the Mansons, which are these people who have been kind of adapted to have these abilities to manipulate reality around them, who are supposed to act as their emissaries and kind of deal out their actions. However, that's not to say that they don't have other human agents as well. And it's kind of been alluded to before now, but well, more than alluded to, it's been seen. But in this book, we get a much greater sense of the scope, because rather than going up necessarily against alien threats as much, it's more about finding where are the other humans working for the Lords, what information can we get out of them, what does that information then lead you onto other human groups, and it's kind of trying to follow that information trail to ultimately work out what it is the Lords are planning. Because even though we know they are planning something that will involve Earth and humanity and so forth, we still at this point don't have the specifics of what exactly it is they're intending. So that's what they're trying to work out here. In the midst of this, though, while the characters initially are just trying to work out what the Lords are generally doing, they also soon discover, however, there's actually another kind of plot that's amidst the chatter that's being discussed by these human agents. Out through space, word is spreading of a potential imminent uprising by a mystery band of warriors against their otherwise peaceful ruling regime. And it's thought that if this is successful, that faction could likely subsequently lead to a resurgence, as say, in the multiversal conflict sooner than even the Brethren Lords are wanting. They want to be the first ones to get in to, again, do their bit of the plot. If the fighting resumes before that, their window of opportunity may have passed. So now the human agents of the Brethren Lords are also trying to work out, from the clues and transmissions they're receiving, what exactly is being planned, how is it going to go down, and most importantly, how can it be stopped? The characters are going around learning from the human agents. They're also learning about this potential threat as well. Meanwhile, again, throughout all of that, there's kind of hints of it in the extract I just read, but we also have here that within the main group itself, so again, Philip's group and all his friends, there are tensions there throughout in turn, where there's little bits of trust starting to come apart. They're not sure who they can trust amongst each other. They're disagreeing on what tactics they should be using, what they should be prioritizing. And as such, as we get through this book, we're going to get more and more interpersonal conflict as well. And again, that's something we'll come on to in a subsequent point. But as such, there is also throughout this book a sense of, if they are going to get through this, they'll probably want to work together. Yet can they continue working together if they're going to continue butting heads in this way? So hopefully that gives you a little bit of a teaser. And obviously, remember, this is not me saying, oh, you must do it now, but just because this was a pause reminder. A couple of people did in the previous chat before I had to shut that down. But if you've got any questions or anything you want to say, interact, then of course you have a YouTube account, you can of course say in the comments as well, or on the Facebook event or Discord or whoever you found about this. Okay. But with that kind of overview given, and again, because of time, because again, everything shifted, let's get on to the second bit. I was just mentioning the tensions between the good characters, but also we have fractures between the Brethren Lords as well worsening. Those fractures had already exist, though, because in the previous books we've seen that the likes of Mordrin, for instance, the youngest of the Brethren Lords, he has started to be questioning Gryle's own methods of what he's doing, and by this point, it's kind of got him in trouble. Throughout book 2, Gryle was kind of tolerating it, trying to control it, but at this point, Mordrin has pushed it too far. And so now at chapter 6 is when we've heard a few things about what's happened to Mordrin, but we don't meet him until this point right here. If he had been able to, all Mordrin would have been able to see in front of him would have been rows upon rows of barred cells filling the tower's cylindrical prison to the brim. The reasoning behind these innumerable containment chambers was that, in the beginning, they were to be used when examining new life forms in the Alpha Realm. But now Mordrin was its only inhabitant, and he couldn't even comprehend or care about it. He was just too busy with his vision flickering in and out of focus, while his mind seemingly exploded and imploded in an agonizing cycle. The process of being shifted repeatedly between corporeal and energy states prevented the youngest of the Brethren Lords from forming the simplest of thoughts, meaning he was not only unaware of how long he had been enduring this punishment, but also incapable of wandering this in the first place. His first proper thought since this latest round of torture began came when the Bracknar, acting on Petty's orders, placed a stubby finger, and the Bracknars being like the slave race of all the towers, placed a stubby finger on the panel beside the cell door. At its touch, the cannibalized entity transmogrifier ground to a halt, its gears screeching louder and louder as its rotation slowed. Finding himself in physical form once more, Mordrin fell to his gnarled knees, a pathetic wheeze escaping his lipless mouth as he hit the floor. Tilting his head slightly, he caught sight of the chandelier-like transmogrifier retracting into its box embedded in the ceiling. He hoped never to see it again, but knew that it was unlikely to be the case. With the reflective lid on the box glinting tauntingly at him, Mordrin pulled himself to his aching feet, only to remember the manacle locked around his neck, chaining him to the back wall. Using what slack there was in the chain, Mordrin made his way towards the Bracknar that had ended his suffering, at least temporarily. The slave did not step back, but it did cower where it stood to some extent. So which of my brothers finally felt a glimmer of sympathy for me? He managed to croak. The Bracknar squeaked, Lord Lance sent me to relieve you, sire. Mordrin would have liked the Bracknar to have acted more frightened of him, but it seems the presence of the cell's webbed-shaped bars made the slave feel safer than it otherwise would have. I don't suppose he told you to let me out of here, did he? The Bracknar shook its crimson head. The urge to pull the wretched thing through the bars was only surpassed by the knowledge that he was more likely to get his way through kindness. So Mordrin changed his mind and instead said, You know, the other lords might treat you like scum, but I've always had a soft spot for you. Have you ever noticed how I've gone easy on your kind when exacting punishments? Which I disagree with. It was difficult to be complimentary to such a repulsive, malformed underling, but it was worth the effort, for the stout being did indeed waddle closer to the crossbars, its bald head becoming bathed in the gloom of the dank chamber, all the way down to the tusks protruding from its pointed chin. There was even a joyful glint in the two eyes on the side of its head, before it was replaced by a distrustful glare. How do you mean? Well, think about it, Mordrin insisted with the best impression of compassion that a recently tortured being can manage. Petty ordered you to abandon whatever it was you were doing to come and end my suffering. Something which I am very grateful for, by the way. When he could have come and done it himself. What kind of person would do that? And Grile, he did this to me, his own brother. Have I ever done anything like that? No. So why don't you side with me for once? The manacle was digging into his rotting neck, but that didn't bother Mordrin now. Who knew when he would have another opportunity like this again? The Bracknar, however, only looked sheepishly at the prisoner. I can't disobey the master. It's not just Grile who is your master. I am one as well. Mordrin knew... Cool, I should have said that differently. It is not just Grile who is your master. I am one as well. Mordrin knew instantly he'd lost his compassionate facade. Not that that meant he'd give up trying. But of course, I can give you status. Give you something that will put you above all the other Bracknars. Technically even above other lords, he persevered, hoping to bring back the look of potential sympathy in its podgy face. You know, it touched you that I joined the Brethren Lords after the others. I was still amongst the ranks of the entities whilst they were first working out how to handle this network of towers, and so know stuff about them that they weren't around to see. I could tell you what I know, and the information about the... Okay, camera just flickered there. Hopefully that's all fine. I'm just waiting for that to catch up. Okay. If that's a problem, just let me know in the chat, but that should be fine. Yes, the camera just flicker for me for a second. And then you'd have inside information about the enemy that Graal would give his, well, someone's right arm for. What do you say? Will you open the door? The Ragnar took a half step back, twisting what neck it had as it looked around the countless circular balconies for a witness. No one was visible. No one was visible in front of the identical containment chambers. No silhouettes impeding its view of the mesh of bars. No figure leaning on railings to see what was taking so long. All was silent in the rest of the prison column, but that only made the matter ambiguous. If you care about us so much, name one of my people, it asked, deciding not to answer the Lord's question just yet. It took Mordrin a minute to work out what the slave was on about, and when he did finally comprehend what had been asked of him, he was infuriated. What? I see, the Ragnar muttered, averting its gaze from the incarcerated lord as it stepped further away. But come back here! Mordrin shrieked. Determined not to let this chance of freedom slip through his fingers, Mordrin laboured against his restraints as much as he could, using what slack there was left in the chain to get as close to the insubordinate underling as possible. The pain around his neck grew to intensities rivaling that of his torture, but his jagged fingernails had the Bracknar's filthy hide in their sights. All they grasped, however, were the bars separating them. The moment his wafer-thin skin made contact with the rough metal, a torrent of electricity shot through the bars into his frail form. To make the matter worse for him, the chain connecting him to the wall retracted with a cacophony of clattering links. If breathing had been vital to him, then his jerking backwards so suddenly at such a rate would probably have caused him even more distress than it did anyway. As Mordrin in his worn robe slammed against the unforgiving wall, his head span and yearned for this torment to be over. The young lord concentrated hard enough to fix his eyes on the Bracknar, guiltily sidling towards the control panel to the door. Mordrin managed to push his hand into the folds of his robes, where his sore fingers were able to wrap themselves around the vial of powder he had protected above all else since he found its contents aboard the Asnamoy frigate back during their mission for the Ark. Could you at least get me a centrifuge? Was his last attempt at gaining some high ground. Not that it did him any good. Unable to cry out any more in protest, Mordrin could only watch as the Bracknar awkwardly pressed its finger to the pad, hence reactivating the transmogrifier. The last thing the Lord saw was the hangdog stare he received from the slave before he went back into a metaphysical limbo. So yeah, things aren't that good for him. Yep, audio survey. Yeah, things aren't that good for our character of Mordrin there. Well, I mean, I'd say, would he stay there for the entire book? Is he going to find some way out? We might be able to make some inferences based on the nature of stories, but again, you'll just have to see for yourselves. But a while, yeah, but I wasn't done this much talking. But got you asked before, but we might have some new people who have joined since. How are we doing? We all right? How's my battery doing? Yeah, battery's doing fine. Yeah, we're all good at the moment. Enjoying as best we can whatever position we're all in at the moment in the world. So I said already that this is going to be a unique copy to me because this is the pre-order copy, so it has your not for resale mark on it, but also this is unique in that I've actually changed a couple of secondary character names in this since I ordered it. Again, it's not names that are important in any way, but when coming out with names, because as either you're writing it or you're reading it, you may not notice necessarily that some names could be similar to some names could be similar to others in the book. Again, especially if they're minor characters that only get mentioned once or something. But as with my website, DominicConchton.com, making out all of the pages, well, 3 pages that exist thus far for this book, one of which being a breakdown of the characters. And with that, I decided back when I was doing the first book that I would include at least a reference to every character who is in the book, because otherwise I'm starting to make decisions as to which characters are important. Obviously, the main characters need to mention, but with the other characters, like how often do they have to appear to be worthy of mentioning in the character breakdown page? And some characters that only appear once might also be really pivotal. So I just mentioned everyone. And the same thing happened with book 2, although before I got the pre-order copy, I was making out that page, and you just noticed that you may have a couple of names a bit similar. Like in this one, I had an Andrew at one point in the book, and then later in the book, I had an Andre, which there's a letter difference. They're technically different names, but they're similar, so I want to change them. Or you might have people that there's a lot of names that begin with T. There's a lot of T names. So let's switch out a couple of those. There's a bit more variety, so we have some other letters here and there. So yeah, so also different here because, again, you don't ever know if you had the two books and we're comparing them side to side, but there's a couple of things in here where an odd name that has since been switched out so that for your version, for your experience, you get as much differentiation in the naming as possible. The Andrew Andre situation, I think, is very unique in that those are basically the same name. That hasn't happened before, but it's that sort of thing. Same initials, same similar recurring letters. Or there was a Jorge and a Jordan, which are both different nationalities and also pronounced differently, and it's different, but because they both started with J-O-R, I again wanted to switch that around. Also on the topic of names, if you follow the Instagram account, the Ragnarök Chronicles, you may have seen that a little while ago, a couple of weeks ago, maybe it's whenever I did it, I did a post where I mentioned that. Okay, so there's a thing before I mentioned in the previous live stream for the Arc of Angels that at some point in the end of 2019, early 2020, whatever, I went through and added some more mythological ties to the books because as I was researching more mythologies, as I generally do anyway, to fill out the books that are going to come ahead. So usually it's for the books ahead, but sometimes I'll think, actually, that kind of fits something I already have in a book that already exists. So unless it's published already, like this one wasn't published yet. Actually, none of them were back in 2020, but I'd go back in and I would add in, kind of change a name here, give a more pointed description here. So if someone did know the mythology, they could make those connections there. Unfortunately, again, for the ones that were for the books that are still to come, obviously I made notes of those. But for the couple of times that I went back and changed something that was in this or books or whatever, I didn't make a note. But of course, it's in the book already. I don't need to know. So then when it comes to proofreading, you come across a term that it's like, I know this is now meant to be a mythological tie. I remember researching it, but I don't remember actually what it was. So I ended up having to try to reverse engineer and find out what it was. I succeeded with the stuff in the Arc of Angels. The only one that was left by the time of the stream wasn't actually a mythological reference. I know that. I'm pretty sure it was a video game Easter egg because it came kind of within the same context as an Easter egg for Five Nights at Freddy's, like a very thin reference to it. But it was a sequence of numbers. It was a person's phone unlock. And the fact that I spelt out what the digits of the person's unlock code were, like there's going to be some significance to it, but I couldn't work out what the significance was. It would convert it into letters, making it musical notes, whatever. Nothing came up. But I'm not so fussed about that one. It came to this. There was a phrase. It's mentioned. I keep knocking the table. It's mentioned once in this book, and it's going to be more of a thing in the next book. Spoiler for the next book. This project called Heroniac Shore. So I mentioned on Instagram. I was like, I'm trying to work out what this is, and I'm trying to work backwards to find it. Anyone have any suggestions? And I have actually gone back and edited into the caption of that post. Not that I'm sure anyone's going to scroll back that far and see it, but I edited that I had found it. I don't actually remember how I found it. Because I know I was trying to scroll through my notes and all these other places, and I just remember then suddenly having the word in front of me. Now, hopefully I'm saying this right. Heroniac Shah, something like that. It's from Hindu mythology. It's a demon. And there are a couple of things relating around that. So even that is one of the benefits of trying to make my corrupted version sound similar, is looking at this word Heroniac Shah. yeah, I could. That's definitely a word, but also some of the surrounding context as well. Yes, that makes sense. This is what I was referring to. So I found that one. That was good. Yeah, just suddenly found myself looking about my notes. There was another thing which isn't in this book. It's in the next book, because I basically looked ahead into the manuscript for the next book to try to find some other things I knew it added in, because I was wondering maybe they came from the same inspiration. Turns out they didn't. But I found another thing in the fourth book, which is Puerto. And I feel like this, I remember that whatever this is, I initially found it via a Wikipedia page. I obviously then would have gone and researched another, because I always take multiple sources to verify what it is I'm talking about with mythology. But I know I first found what this thing was a Wikipedia page. I'm almost certain it was like a guardian figure, or something whose character is protective of someone else, or is generally a deity of protection or something. And what I found is, what I've discovered a couple of days ago, is that while Google Chrome will only, if you go into history, it'll only show you the last 90 days. If you go to myactivity.google.com, it shows you everything that you have done. I've managed to go back as far as 2019, so I don't know how, in theory, it would keep on going forever. So that's been really interesting, actually. I have been scrolling through, I've refined it slightly in that because it would also throw up YouTube, what I've watched on YouTube and what I've done, whatever. So I've restricted it to my laptop, because I know it's on a laptop. I've restricted it to just Google searches and websites that I visited via Google, which includes Wikipedia and stuff, because it lists those websites as well. And I've basically just been scrolling through my history to find it. I didn't go from present day. I've started from end of July last year, because that was around the time that I was formatting Gift of the Mansin, because I figured I probably made these changes before that point. And I think I've made it back through to mid-March at this point. That's on my laptop, literally just scrolling through everything. And it is promising, because I have found these other pages like, oh yes, I remember reading about that, and I know where I made that note. These other whole sections that this is very familiar. This was my phase of researching. It is possible that maybe it won't show everything, because maybe, even though it's showing Wikipedia and all this stuff, maybe for whatever reason I had to go through Google first for it to register on there, or maybe it'll be on there. But either way, still going through trying to find stuff. If not, maybe I did do it after I got out Gift of the Mansin at least. So if by the time I get back to December 2019, because I actually checked there first, because that's where I did Hiranyaksha, because when I found that first, that was back in December 2019. So we'll check that month. Once I get back to like January, and if I still haven't found it, I'll then go from December 2020 and work backwards again towards August, hopefully to find it again. But also, again, it's a very interesting tool. I mean, if you get worried about the notion of, again, people tracking what you're doing online, maybe don't look at it. But I have nothing to hide in what I'm searching online. I've just found it a very interesting experience. Just again going through essentially memory lane for some things. Oh, I remember Googling that very specific particular question, because it was a weird notion of why is X, Y, Z. And then other times, other things that, why on earth did I Google that? I have no recollection of what the context is. But that's also what I've been doing at the moment. But with that, okay, I talk for always longer than I think I do in these things. Let's get on to extract number 3, unless, again, as ever, anyone has any other comments or questions they want to ask in the comments, which again I'll respond to, or again on the Facebook event, or wherever you know me and could contact me. Yeah, no notifications there. Oh yeah, that happened last time as well. I always find it so weird that YouTube emails you to tell you that you're live. Like, I know I'm live. I'm doing it. I guess it was like an accidentally going live, I guess. I don't know, confirmation. But either way. So I've mentioned before how part of the missions for this was the idea of going around the world and finding out more about the human agents as more the conspiracy side of things. And if we're talking about conspiracies, then we're talking about, well, when we're talking about conspiracies, people may say things that go all the way to the top. Well, that kind of may be the case here, as now we have Noah and Carrie about to try to sneak into the Oval Office in the White House to try to find out what's going on in there. And the tiniest bit of context, there's been something that's kind of been dampening Noah's abilities, but as we'll see in this passage, that's already kind of gone past. But there's a line about it just to clarify what that is. While that had been going on, Noah and Carrie had been sneaking the other way up the corridor. With Noah still feeling the effects of whatever it was that was impacting him, they couldn't hide out of phase just yet, meaning conventional methods of stealth were high on their list of priorities. As they got closer to where Carrie claimed the Oval Office to be, this, according to the floor plan she'd been provided, the more voices of members of staff they heard. They were hushed, presumably because the rest of the building was not that awake as of yet, but nevertheless each marked another obstacle in their way if Tony could not give the Manson his abilities back. What are we going to do about them? Carrie wondered, indicating the voices up ahead. I'd say wait for me to get better, but we need to get to Frayne sooner than later. So, what do we do? Well, Noah considered his options from his position kneeling against the wall. You could always try what Eve did. Eve previously having kind of just acted as distraction by playing like the innocent damsel in distress, which she was not happy about doing, but she did. Excuse me? You want me to distract them by being all cutesy? Let's for a moment ignore the fact that I'm just not going to do that. How would it be plausible when we're inside? Do you have any better ideas? It occurred to Carrie yet again how annoying she could find Noah sometimes. She glanced up the corridor, then back at her companion, then up the corridor once more. Why couldn't I have just stayed with the others? She moaned softly. Because I wanted to be able to get the job done. Now go. Her lack of understanding of what that was supposed to mean adding to her dislike of the man, Carrie begrudgingly obliged. She couldn't say she hadn't had practice acting in front of the others, for the sake of her popular reputation, of course. So as she neared the Oval Office and distanced herself from her antagonizer, she tried to adopt a pitiful countenance. Noah would have happily watched her go, to see how things would have panned out. Who's ringing the doorbell? Panned out. But it was then that he, without warning, felt the beastly ravishing of his strength by the source being lifted, relieving him of its pressure. He still could have let Carrie do whatever it was she would have done, but due to the necessity and newfound surge of energy that came with his regaining of his abilities, he had no alternative but to run after her. Is that good? Yeah, cool. To run after. If the members of security around the Oval Office had turned any earlier on hearing Carrie's footsteps, they would have had to deal with whichever way she had chosen to play the situation. As it was, Noah dragged her out of phase before this could happen. Perhaps one or two of them might have caught a glimpse of them out the corners of their eyes, but it would have been so insubstantial that they would have surely dismissed it as nothing. On the other side of the wall, the invisible pair found themselves faced with a scene of which they had seen similar in films. The Oval Office, with its similarly shaped carpet filling much of the room beneath two expensive sofas and a table, partially under the shadow of the resolute desk, as lit by the three tall windows revealing the slowly brightening skyline beyond, was there for them to watch unhindered. At the desk were the men they desired, Minister Frayne and President Evan March. Unfortunately, they had missed the start of their conversation. Once more, I am not going to attempt an American accent. Or Canadian, rather, because Frayne is Canadian, March is American. I was just saying that it would be awkward if we had to train him for Bluebeam. Frayne was in the middle of saying. Could you not just fix it? President March chuckled. Don't worry, he wouldn't win the election either way. The man's a fool. He's only in it for the publicity. I get that, but still I have issues with what he says he stands for. I know what we might be considering. I know what we might. Why can't I read? I know what we want might be considered by some to not be the best course of action for this planet, but even so, if even we view him like this, it doesn't matter. It's not like we're going to make it. Not like we're going to make it to the election. It's almost time. You're right, Frayne nodded. I give it a week. The two politicians shared pleased, knowing looks. Noah and Carrie would have shared sickened ones, but of course they had to keep listening. Still, Frayne continued, finishing this line of musing, what do you suppose he would have made of our submarines? Would he get to the end of the word? March scoffed before regaining his usual composure. But I don't suppose they're here yet. It's been long enough, Frayne determined, taking a quick look back at the door. I wouldn't have thought we should start without them. We know now for sure they're around here, assuming, of course, it isn't just a malfunction. I say if they've taken longer than this, we'll just have to deal with missing bits. It finally sounded like they're about to hear what they came here for. Noah pulled Carrie along the edge of the curved room, getting them into a better position to ensure they caught every last word that was to come out of the politicians' mouths. Minister Frayne leant on the president's desk. I was surprised when my assistant Ellie told me you'd received the asset so soon. So you said on the phone. But just because we've come to possess it doesn't mean we understand it. That's why I had Ellie bring with me what research we have on its origin. I've left it in the car, but I'd be happy to have it sent up to you. Noah's telling of we should try to get our hands on those to Carrie was so soft that even she could barely hear him. And she was as close as she was prepared to get to the man. I do have to wonder, though, Frayne went on to say, whether this is really the best course of action. March was apparently feeling the complete opposite of the matter. The Lords know what they're doing. If they wish it to be known, then it shall be known. Quite. Frayne withdrew his phone and set it out on the desk. And so it is known. Are you certain about that? Well, it's one of my methods, Frayne conceded. So the asset, it definitely affects them? March rose from his seat and stepped over to the window, hiding his grin in case it gave the matter away before his words could. So I'm told. Even so, I have fail-safes in place to make its effects lethal the instant they try anything against us. Actually, I'm half interested to see what would happen. While she couldn't have seen it, Carrie felt Noah's grip tighten on her arm. What are we going to do? What are we going to do? She asked in what was barely more than a whisper. Keep quiet, the tense man warned her. We can still listen without acting. And speaking of this, Minister Frayne tapped his phone. This is how we'll keep in contact with the transport. March turned back to the desk, eyeing the device. And how much is on its way? A truck of documents comprising not only the latest details on our terrorist friends, but on all the details you could ever want on the revolutionaries and their predicted actions. The president walked right in front of the out-of-phase pair, but he obviously couldn't have known they were there as he queried, where is it now? I can track them via this phone as well. Carrie tried to pull Noah back towards the door, not comfortable with how close the president had got, at the same time theorizing, could you get that on your phone using your tracer thing? Should do. Noah agreed, only to be silenced by what he heard March say next. You know what? I'm bored. How about I make our assets deadly now? I could give them 3 minutes. Noah wasn't waiting around to hear any more. As well as the obvious threat, he could have sworn at least one of the politicians had sneered at them. Not offering Carrie an explanation, really it should have been evident, the man pulled them both through the wall and back towards where they'd left Tony, leaving the president behind, he indeed taunting them. 2 minutes 59, 2 minutes 57, 2 minutes 55. Got to take a bit more of a drink. So, if you have seen... I really shouldn't start talking when I know about Stick Sip. If you've seen the likes of CinemaSins on YouTube, everything the pronoun game, when they remark that something is not specified for the sake of keeping it mysterious, like saying he or she rather than using a person's name. Again, if people in a conversation know who they're talking about, they don't necessarily need to give that. But also here is kind of a similar vibe, I guess, wherein because Frayne and March know what it is they're talking about, they don't necessarily have to speak explicitly about the topic. Therefore, we are left here with since they're talking about something, there's something going on, and trying to build some of the pieces together. But we don't know exactly what's going on thus far. So again, I have to continue from that hook, hopefully, to read on to find out what is actually on that transport, what are the documents about, what can the characters learn if they are able to get their hands on them, which it's no guarantee that they can. So, I said a lot. I said before because I set things up in conversations. That's what I do. Said before about how, or talking about the other elements of tone in this story. So, yeah, that's on charge now. Yeah, as well as being different structurally in terms, or feeling different in that they have now base operations. Also say, whereas the first book is kind of your introduction to everything that's going on, and the second book is kind of a wider view. You're getting to see more of the creatures that inhabit the multiverse. You get to understand more of the science behind it, and there's more backward story stuff. Book 3 is then kind of the character book, and then book 4 being the climactic action book. So with this, yeah, there's a lot here about the emotional state to the characters, the dynamics between them, the interpersonal stuff, the friendships, the breaking down of, the strengthening of here and there. And this, it was always the intention that this sort of stuff would go on, but also I feel is a little bit reflective of kind of my state of mind when I was, because I finished writing this first year of university. I think so, it's a few years ago now. But at that time, yeah, kind of in the character of Philip, in terms of it's in this story, he's based upon the ending of book 2, which I won't specify because spoilers if you haven't read it yet, but he's in a situation where the others aren't necessarily trusting of him as much, and he's trying to, throughout this book, therefore, regain that trust to prove to them that he's still one of them, that he's still as much of an asset as he ever has been in this. Because throughout this, he's kind of, whereas before we're seeing my train of thought is all over the place. Whereas also previously in the first 2 books, that's another difference. While we do get other points of view sometimes, primarily we're still following Philip. In these other 2 books now, we're starting to have more primary points of view rather than other cutaways and other bits and stuff. So we're not only primarily following Philip at this point. Honestly, in terms of the group, you could argue that Eve is the closest to like the protagonist hero, and even though she's not necessarily leading the missions, that's more Noah, she is kind of like the moral compass and the one who's trying to keep things on track and everything. You can argue she's kind of more filling that role, whereas Philip, more often than not in this book, well, it does have kind of the group section as well, but he is more on his own tangential path. So the group is doing one thing and he's kind of doing his own thing as well. So that's another difference here. And again, that will continue into book 4. We have different characters in different places having their own perfectly weighty arcs and plots going on. And so Philip there, his attempts to kind of reconnect with them and what he's going through on a personal level with the fact that he's struggling to make those connections again with them. I feel that kind of does feed in from my own, as I say, experiences and mind space at the time of writing it. What is that with my voice today? I don't know. And either way, yeah, so that's just, if we're looking for character out of my writing, this is probably the book that you want to go to, of course, although you'd go to the first 2 books first. But yeah. With that in mind, that is also the source of some of the particular notable twists and turns in this book as well, which again, were always a plan from the beginning. It was always known that these sort of things were going to happen. So going into this book, while certain other elements became fleshed out and developed, like, no, it's not in what I'm going to read here, but if you were to go to DominicHodgson.com and go to the Celestial Coup sample extracts, because I always make sure that the sample extracts that you can read for free there in the PDF forms are different to the extracts that we read in these streams to give you the most different stuff. It's not just repeating for you the same stuff if you have read it before. But if you read one of those, there is a section wherein Philip perceives himself as being plagued by this monstrous apparition, which that was not in the original. That was more, as I was writing through, I was thinking, I want something else to kind of fill this out, what's happening with Philip, and it just had, this is a really interesting idea for a creature, and that then carried on throughout, again, book 3 and into book 4 as well. So elements like that came afterwards, but there are other things. The final chapter of this book was basically since writing most of book 1. I don't think I had it in mind when I very first began writing book 1, but from early on, I basically knew book 3 is ending in this final chapter, and honestly is probably one of my favorite chapters of all the books. And I really can't wait to get and react to it. But yes, so writing it through, it's always about building up to and foreshadowing and setting up where we end. And this also, there's other twists before that as well. But I don't know, just this feels like the particularly pivotal one. I never want to sound like, with that balance, I don't want to sound unnecessarily self-aggrandizing when talking about this, but of course with self-promotion, which still is a thing, but still is self-promotion, you need to try to sell yourself. But I really can't wait for people to get to that ending and find out what happened. Why not? Yep, still got audio. Cool. Okay, but of course, yes, if you haven't read the first 2 books already, again, these books are designed such that you could pick it up as the first book and go through it. The opening sections do give enough of a incorporated, gradual, and then this was the thing, and this was the thing. But obviously, ideally, you want the experience if I've gone through the other ones first. I would say you can find the book links in the description below, but of course, we had to restart this whole stream. So I'll copy over the links and stuff after this is done, and use the actual thumbnail and hide the previous stream and all of that. Or again, on the Facebook page, the Twitter, the Instagram. If you know me on Discord, it's on Discord as well. Loads of links, or just search Dominic. Okay, if you're going to search this book, Celestial Coup, be warned, Amazon really wants to autocorrect it to Celestial Cup. It will automatically do this. You need to select, no, I mean coup. Which is fair enough, I guess. It wants to avoid the word coup. It's kind of unfortunate in timing, but either way, yes. I mean, by all means, buy a Celestial Cup if you want, but even if you include my name, Ragnarök Chronicles, it will still, you need to force it to do that. Or you go to my author page. Again, if you're looking at any of my books, you can select then on me, and it will show all the ones available. I think it will default to showing you the ebook copies, but then you can also look for paperback and whatever. One thing I found is that because when you're setting this up on the Amazon Kindle Direct Publishing thing, when you're setting up the pricing, for whatever reason, I never clicked on a certain down box towards where you set the pricing. So up until this point, the primary distribution thing has, as a version of Amazon through which it's sold, has been the US, Amazon.com. And so the automatic price is in dollars, and then it converts it into everything else. What this also led to is that if you, say, left a review, which also leave reviews, please, once you have read them, leave honest reviews, regardless of what you think. But once you have, if you leave a review, say, on any of the other versions of Amazon, so .uk, .eu, whatever, it would then share those reviews with the primary one, the American one as well. However, if a review was directly left on .com, it would not feed back into any of the other ones. So that's why, if you were to go to, say, Gift of the Manson, it would say it has 2 reviews on .co.uk. Yet if you went to .com, it would have 3 reviews, because someone who reviewed it directly on .com, because that was the primary, it didn't feed back. I have now switched this all around so that .uk is now the primary one. So hopefully all reviews will show there. And also it means that the prices are originally in pounds, and I don't know what difference that makes, but anyway. Yeah, so that's now a minor difference. I've adjusted the prices of a couple of them, of the books, because again, exchange rates changed as well, but also because I'm so used to looking at the dollar amounts, I never really noticed what the pound amounts were. I think I've managed to keep them more or less the same, but either way, yeah. So all of the ebooks are £4.25 because that's exactly half of the paperback of book one, which was £8.50. And then basically how I do it is, well, I've talked about the royalty system before, but what you have for the paperbacks is it's the sale price. Amazon takes 40%, and then from what's left, minus the printing cost, that's then the royalties that you have. So total, Amazon takes 40, minus printing cost, you get that. So what I've done is basically, I base the price around that I will essentially get £2 per paperback. So it keeps going up because because it's more pages, each of them are getting longer and longer, so it's a higher printing cost, therefore more money is taken out, so I have to keep raising the price to get that slightly. So I think this one is £9.90, this latest one. So it's paperback, £8.50, £9.06, that one's an odd one, and then £9.90 to keep it. I could ask for more money, but that would be raising the price further, and I don't want to get you out of pocket. But also I could go for lower, but of course I still want to be making some money from this. That's the balance. And as I say, the ebooks are £4.25 consistently, because like there's a digital delivery cost of 6p, and then they take 25%, I think, from those ones. Yeah, I get £2.93, something like that, from the ebook. So I technically get more money from the ebooks because there's no printing cost, and so I can make it cheaper and whatever. But let's say people might prefer the actual paper copies. But either way, it's up to you, whatever you prefer as your reading method. But I can't remember if I exactly had a point with that, or if I was just describing the process. But yeah, my stuff. Thanks. Either way, leave reviews on the UK Amazon, whichever is your local Amazon. All right. How do you have time? So 40 minutes. Oh, we are actually basically bang on time for where we're meant to be now. It's kind of, I must have gone quicker on certain sections than I intended to. Either way, cool. All right. With that, once again, just in case if there are no other questions, questions you can leave in the chat if you so wish, or whichever method you communicate with me by if you know me more personally. Next section. All right. So talking about interpersonal conflicts. This next section I'm about to read, this was, in terms of the first draft, the last section that I wrote. I have since gone back and obviously edited stuff and changed things here, but this, where is it? This, I kind of, for whatever reason, I don't know if it'll be the same now or not, because I haven't actually written like an entirely new prose in a while. I still mean to be better busy, but at the time, at least, I found choreographing action sequences to be the most difficult bit. I could picture kind of what's going on in my head, but it was a bit hard to get down to page. So this kind of action sequence here was the last bit that I went back to and wrote afterwards. Speaking of writing things out of order, I'm sure I'll mention this when we come in 3 months' time to book 4, but like the last thing I wrote of book 4 was chapter 2. Everything else then went back to chapter 2 because for whatever reason I just didn't feel like writing it at the time. But anyway, where are we? So in this case, I'm actually not going to give entirely the opening context to this sequence, just because leave something. But what we need to know is that at this point, Philip and Noah are two Mansons at the moment, is in present day, aren't getting along as well as they might, let's just say. And also, Actually, yeah, that should be all that you need. So, we shouldn't be here. I need you back, Noah said into the back of Philip's head. Well, maybe you should have done a better job of earning my presence, Philip snapped back at him. It didn't matter to him what he was saying. He only wanted to distract himself so as to not register any unwanted order, however worked up or slanderous he got in the process. Maybe you should have listened to me more. At least, okay, no, I do need to give context. So at this point, Philip has a neural chip in his brain, which is basically making him subject to direct orders that he hears and processes. So, right, in order, which wasn't implanted by Noah, but to clarify, it was probably someone else. But because of this, in order to try to keep his own free will, he needs to not register the orders, the instructions that anyone, in this case Noah, might be giving him. Maybe you should have listened to me more, at least given my ideas a chance. Maybe you should have done a better job at trying to get this thing out of me instead of giving up so easily. Or maybe that was what you all planned all along. Just make it look like you're trying to help me, but really keep me under your control so that I won't question how you're using me as your personal pawn in your war. In his fervour, Philip had accidentally let loose a ball of energy from his fingertips into the ground. Yeah, the idea of energy, plasma, whatever, that's one of, while I try to have science in there, that's one of those just sci-fi terms. I'm just going to call it energy. I know it's not technically energy, it's plasma or whatever, calling it energy. Both he and Noah stared at it, unsure of what this unplanned show of defiance meant for their very immediate futures. Luckily, he was looking so intently at Philip, Noah spotted the signs of the teen's next move before he was able to perform it. Letting loose his own blast of energy, the American managed to send Philip flying through the air before the ripples in space could carry him away in transit. Spread-eagled on the ground, Philip rubbed his newborn grazes, his eyes burning with a fury sparked by the energy that he'd just had forced into him. That was how it's going to be, huh? So be it. The next thing Noah saw was Philip sliding out of phase, leaving the road ahead of him as bare as it had been before they'd arrived. Philip could be coming at him from any direction. He could avoid him by going out of phase as well, but he didn't consider that to be the best course of action. Whilst he himself could be seen, Philip would focus on him as a target, and as such, his position would be revealed soon enough. All Noah would do would stay still and take in his surroundings in case there was anything in his vicinity that could be of service. Besides the houses and parked cars, there was really only the line of wooden telephone poles. Out of nowhere, Noah found his legs being knocked out from under him, as with one muscular arm, Philip dropped back into phase momentarily. Even as he was falling, Philip slipped out of phase again, his momentum passing him through the man's torso, putting him in a position to barrel Noah over in midair from the other side. Why can't you just let me be happy? Was what Philip wanted to say in that moment. His words were cut far short, however, as he felt an array of sharp points penetrating his skin of that arm. In the midst of being flung about, Noah had managed to latch onto him with an iron grip, at the same time extending his nails into barbs that cut onto the teen's flesh for dear life. That hung onto the teen's flesh for dear life. That makes more sense. Thus, Philip was pulled over, only prevented from falling atop his fellow manson by the fact that the man's own arm was locked and vertical. Acting purely instinctively now, fueled by a desire to not let this man take him back so easily, Philip lashed downwards with a burning hand, forcing the heat he was exuding into the man's face. Fighting the limits of his reach, he tried to inch his fingertips closer to the eyes. Any burns would heal soon enough, but that didn't stop Noah from being subjected to the pain right now. He recognized that he was in a position to remove Philip from the situation, yet at that moment it seemed more pressing to avoid further temporary damage to his body. He therefore swung his feet up and gave an almighty push into the boy's abdomen. He therefore, releasing his nails at the same time to allow him to fly backwards through the air. His limbs windmilling, Philip somehow managed to land on his feet, steadying himself within the space of a few stumbles. Eyeing Noah as he got to his own feet, the conclusion ran across his mind that he might not be able to win against the adult Manson in the long run. The best he could hope to do was prove his point. He would not willingly submit to the control of others any longer. He would, it seemed, in the face of that prospect, send out a stream of energy pulsars at his potential oppressor. Deftly, Noah volleyed them back, having himself regained his standing position, directing them in the direction they had come from, as to avoid unnecessary damage to their surroundings. Pressing forward, Philip began to advance, not slowing in his release of new energy bursts, as well as deflecting his old ones yet again. As the Intermansim light show went on, the balls of energy began to merge together, moulding into larger, formless projectiles whose intensity grew as the pair's proximity shortened. While Philip was taking a step for every release, Noah was standing his ground, his legs braced against each residual impact. Eventually, though, he had to change tactic. Philip was getting so much closer, and the energy was rapidly building to a dangerous level. With a flick of his wrist, Noah suddenly sent the ominous ball upwards into the thankfully plane 3 sky, rather than back at the team, removing it from the playing field. Even the momentary glance skywards to watch it might have been too much of a distraction, though, as Philip didn't stop sending yet more pulses his way. It was only as he was looking back down that Noah was able to clumsily deflect them into a car on the opposite side of the road, denting the side with accompanying streams of smoke and ringing alarms. The next thing Philip knew, he was being thrown backwards as his body rode the crests of waves in the air, ones which carried him right to the same vehicle that had just been made collateral damage. Landing roughly on the tarmac, he took enough control of his spinning head to try to spot what had caused such an unforeseen shockwave. All he saw was Noah, catching his breath but ultimately unmoved. At least that's how it looked to him. To Noah, it was as if he had been everywhere and nowhere, this apparently being the side effect of entering and exiting transit on the exact same spot. The ripples of reality caused at the entrance and exit combining to an increased intensity. He had long wondered if that particular move would work, and how had he got around to testing his theory. One additional unexpected aspect of this maneuver was that, while tiring him somewhat, this had not been as fatiguing as if he had used transit to go elsewhere. Perhaps he should have tried it sooner. If he was to wonder any more about this use of his long-time ability, it would have to be done later, for right then it was more important to dodge the detached car door being flung at his face. Contorting out of its flight path faster and further than any normal human had any right to be doing, Noah locked gaze onto Philip leaning against the car, whose condition he'd just worsened yet more. The teen was already wrenching off another section of the metalwork, but knowing what was coming this time around, Noah was able to propel the projectile into a wooden telephone pole, where it stuck out at an awkward angle. Already advancing on his protege, once more, the adult found himself the target of yet another energy ball. However, in this instance, he simply knocked it to the one side. We are not starting this again. Having said this, his next move might have come across as hypocritical, but the way he saw it, he wasn't starting a rally. Noah only sent out an energy pulse of his own to deter Philip as the teen primed himself to attempt fleeing in transit for a second time, the blast purposefully missing by a few millimeters. With wild eyes casting over the impact spot, Philip protested, "Can't you just let me go?" And what would happen if I did? What do you think you'd do? Or are you just acting on the order the Namods gave you? Think about it. This act of free will could just be another example of your lack of control. Despite thus thinking about it indeed, his retort remained identical to what it would have been. They just opened my eyes to the answer. I would have done the same if I thought of it myself. My point is, you can't stay here forever. At the very least, you're re-emphasizing your family as a potential piece of leverage for the Brethren Lords to hold over you. At least they understand me. I don't have to doubt how they view me, that they're not just being kind to my face, while in truth they're tired of my presence. With Philip backing up along the length of the car and beyond, Noah kept on firing bolts of energy at his feet. He wanted his full attention for now. At the same time, the elder Manson was increasing his size, for a brief period hollowing out parts of his insides to build out the outside. He wanted anyone who saw him to be intimidated, for Philip to have no choice but to come across as the victim rather than the equal aggressor. For time, I'd have another half page, but I'm actually going to stop there with just a little bit of the fight to go, just to keep you in suspense about how that would turn out. All right. So we've got, well, in theory, half an hour left, but again, these have no strict timetable, just a guideline. So actually, this was no way an intended segue, but I'm going to make use of it as well. We had there some fighting. What else has fighting? Game of Thrones. The video that I released part 1 of a few weeks ago. That, again, if you've been following the YouTube channel, if you haven't yet, please subscribe, check it out. We also have every 4 weeks, in theory, if technology doesn't break on us, the Making a Sequel series, wherein rather than talking about my own books, I'd say that we'll take a given franchise and say, given what kind of plot threads are left, what other story could we make? Usually, I think in usually, that was the correct thing to say. These are ideas that I've come up with in the past, and I'm more just digging back up to present for the videos. You did have the Mario one, which, hey, thank you, Elliot, for subscribing. If you're one of the watchers or you didn't just subscribe coincidentally. Yeah, with the Mario one back in August, September, that kind of time, maybe October, I did spend 2 months coming up with around 30 ideas for new Mario games, which I then wrote in an 80,000 plus word Google Doc, which you can read now. Please read it. I've spent a lot of time on it and I really enjoy it. But anyway, that was in the case of a new one. However, with the Game of Thrones videos, that is something that I came up with while season 8 was airing. So again, if you haven't watched part 1, the whole thing was, it was at the time I wondered, and I give a new one, not new, but a contrived explanation of why it's a sequel and not an alternate universe. But what if the long night had lasted for an entire series rather than being dealt with in one episode? And ultimately, I also talk about how, whereas initially I had done, at the time back in 2019, was it? I plotted it out as a regular 10-episode series. Even then, I subsequently realized that's probably rushing things too quickly, so I instead made it 2 6-episode series. So the part 1 that I released a few weeks ago was like my version of Series 8, and then the next thing I have to record, because I'm a little bit ahead, is part 2. So my season 9, the actual ending of everything. Because though that video is going to be so much longer than the first one, what I'm basically going to be doing after I finish recording this, I was doing a bit of it yesterday as well, is going back and finishing proofreading the documents where I wrote all my notes. Because again, with the longer stuff, I like to include a Google Doc in the link of the video so people can read it rather than necessarily watching it if they prefer to read than watch. So I just need to, again, because I wrote this years ago, just going back to some proofreading, make sure everything makes sense. And so, because as soon as I get that done, I am free to, when I have the opportunity, sit down for however many hours and record that. Because the first one, it was like an hour and a half, maybe video, something like that, and it was 2 hours recording. But it was like an hour and 20, something like that. But with that, because I was I kept basically all of episode 1 and 2 the same, and half of episode 3 the same. It was kind of like just half a series I was more talking about, with just a couple of notes at the beginning saying, I would tweak this, I would change this. Whereas this one, because it's 6 entirely new episodes, yeah, this is going to be longer. It has occurred to me, maybe I could split it up again, but that would be prolonging it even further for people who don't watch Game of Thrones. I try to set those Making a Sequel videos up so they can be viewed by people even who haven't watched the original source material. So for context, I've also done, let's say, Mario, Stargate, Saw. I've done more. What were the other ones? Five Nights at Freddy's, stuff like this. And I've got a couple of other ones lined up as well. I've got a couple more lined up after this. But for those who don't care about watching Game of Thrones video either way, just talking about the concepts of Game of Thrones, obviously have no actual content to it in terms of violence or adult themes that you don't care about or don't want to watch. But if there's, I don't want to make 3 videos, so, and again, it fits nicely as a single series. So I'll try to get that done in a single go, but it's going to be even longer. No, I get it. It's one of the things where I hate to try to come across as self-aggrandizing or narcissistic, arrogant, or whatever. But I do like the ideas that I came up with, especially for this one and the Mario. So hopefully people can have it, either give it a watch or give it a read. Let me know what they think. How I give the caveat in. I think I gave the caveat in that one, but I'll re-emphasize it in part 2 because it definitely applies to part 2. I did lean into the magic a fair bit in that new Final Series. It's all magic, more or less, that either exists in the show or the release of the books anyway. I haven't gone completely out of left field with it, but still, I did rely on, we're going to do some kind of mystic stuff with this rounding off in the fighting of the White Walkers and stuff. But again, it's all hypothetical anyway. It's not like it's actually being made by HBO or whoever. But anyway, check it out if you haven't already, if you're interested in that sort of stuff. The other thing that's kind of potentially slightly annoying with it, and again, I mentioned, I can't remember if I went into detail with it before. I think I posted it, but before I'm in previous streams. The fact that it's my camera system, whatever, it's already done a little bit of a glitch thing earlier in the screen that I noticed. I know the audio is still playing, so that's the main thing. But what happens is sometimes in the recording, there'll be a slight glitch, and then the audio will go completely out of sync. But even just by a few frames. But it means that when in the editor, I then have to go in and basically separate the audio and shift it to realign it. And it will then, without any further glitches, part of it will be delayed back until I shift everything forwards to line it up again. But then later on, I don't know, 10, 20 minutes later, the audio should then actually be shifted, syncs back into it. It kind of fluctuates, and I don't know what's going on, and it's kind of really annoying. I've also, because I didn't start with this camera, I got this later into doing the YouTube stuff. I originally recorded it on my tablet, which was really annoying for data storage. What I've done with the next video to go up, I actually have recorded it on the tablet again just to compare, because I feel like the actual image quality is better on that as opposed to this camera, even though this camera is supposed to be HD, 1080p, whatever. So I'll have to see what works better, and what I basically have to do is just shift things backwards and forwards between devices. But again, if you do watch videos, please watch videos if you're interested in this sort of stuff. Again, usually the videos are talking about the lore of my books or mythology or stuff like that. But let me know what you think is better. Either this kind of quality camera, which has been almost all the videos, versus the tablet stuff, which is the next video to come out on Thursday if the internet holds up again. Or you go back to the very original videos. We'll deal with that as well. So just a technical thing that I don't know what's going on, but it's behind the scenes stuff. That's what I said was going on in the stream. All right. With that, let's probably get on to the final section. So I just need to consider how much of this answer could, because of this, as you see, this section is coming towards the end. I think to kind of avoid some bits, I'm actually going to doctor a couple of sentences to avoid some of the reveals that happened earlier. I'm now just thinking, because if I start there, that's going to make it slightly shorter. Because given how long it takes me to read this stuff, it should be fine. Anyway, so I'm just saying, if you end up reading this, not that I'm expecting anyone to suddenly compare, but if you were to read this and notice what I say now, a couple of places may not exactly line up. But that's because I'm just hiding some reveals that happened earlier, as they say. For the context, so in book 2, we met the Palantheas, who also mentioned in book 1, who are these kind of insectoid justice enforcement beings. Well, that's how they see themselves. And so Philip, Noah, and Tony have just gone, or they've gone with the Palantheas to this space station called the Cocoon, where there's like a threat that needs to be dealt with. So, with no depressurization having taken place, the sudden release of air into the vacuum of space shot the soldiers out with it. Yet another thing the Palantheas could have better warned the visiting trio about. Philip, at least, was far too distracted by the abrupt sights of the station and disappearing saucer, as well as by the stomach-churning sensations brought on by the descent, to notice the warm buzz his suit was suddenly giving off. How could he when he was faced with such an imposing colossus? Before him loomed up from the void a bronze monolith that he couldn't possibly gauge it. That must have been anywhere up to 100 kilometers in height, and at least 1 in diameter where the main body was concerned. Wider if you included all the other bits latched onto it, too. Its skin was made of the same material as that of the frigate that encountered in the past. Patterns of curling lines marked the length of the cocoon, or the cocoon being the name of the station. All of them tending towards the infrequent breaches in the hull that acted as entranceways into whatever was inside. As for the surrounding structures, it looked as though they were an entirely separate structure to the cocoon, something that had hooked itself around the monolith rather than originally being a part of it. The swirling rings of metal arms reminded him of miniature spiral galaxies stacked on top of one another, each the base of a town of cuboid houses. The inner edge of each ring dug into the cocoon, especially around the aforementioned breaches. From this distance, there were no visible signs of activity upon these arms, but that could soon all change with their approach, and they were most certainly approaching with speed. Casting his gaze about the other members of the descending party, Philip quickly noted that none of the Palanthian soldiers were visibly perturbed by the fact that they were plummeting towards solid enemy metal with no apparent means of deceleration, although that did little to comfort him. Trapped in his own shell of armour, the young Manson had no way of knowing what was going to happen to provide them with a safe landing, meaning he was given no choice but to let his mind dwell on the only facts that were known to him. In this case, that without intervention, this fool would definitely kill them before the enemy even had a chance to. Philip may have been too focused on that reasonable discontentedness about their situation to have noticed the fluid film he passed through just above the tops of the buildings. But as they at last became acquainted with the unforgiving ground, for all his flinching, the young Manson couldn't help but be aware of the sudden feeling of a cushion of air rapidly, yet comfortably, decelerating him in the last few seconds. Against all expectations, finding himself standing shakily upon his 2 unshattered legs, Philip gazed around in shock at the other members of the landing party. "What the hell was that?" he yelled once he had his breath back. Not that anyone around him seemed to hear his exclamation. No one must have realised that he was trying to make himself heard, for he indicated a toggle on the back of their helmet's jawline, which, once twisted by both of them, allowed the adult to succeed in relaying, "You need to open a comms link if you want to speak." The suppression field generated by your suit will, among other things, prevent any sound you make from being heard. Continued the explanation. I mentioned this in the video that I uploaded this week about aliens and stuff. The Palanthia's names and stuff is meant to be given kind of a clicking sound. Again, I mentioned at the beginning of the screen, YouTube live streaming doesn't allow me to use a microphone for some reason. Hopefully this picks up without one. But it says, strictly speaking, this is meant to be done. But for the sake of making sure it's picked up here and audibility, is and that is why, despite the fact we have indeed entered the atmospheric bubble, we will not be removing any parts of our armour. The less noise we make, the less likely we are to be picked up on. You still could have given us a better heads up of what we're about to go through, no, Philip objected. Tony felt he should chip in. He's not wrong. A little more information would have been nice. I will also say that this communications line should be kept clear unless absolutely necessary, so there is to be no irrelevant conversations, Gat advised the squadron in general. But the teens couldn't help but feel that they were being spurred. Great. Philip nodded, exchanging looks with Tony. So, what now? Wait, sorry. So, by atmospheric bubble, do you mean we could breathe out here? They will be using a regulation atmosphere, yes. Regulation? The Palanthea hesitated momentarily. Every habitat, stationary or mobile, must conform to respiratory codes to ensure that the common individual may be present upon it unimpeded. Due to similarities in the chemical structures within living organisms, the same collection of gases are often needed for such processes. Yes, proportions may vary, and there will be numerous other species that have specific alternative requirements in turn, but from a statistical standpoint, you and anyone else should be able to manage to some degree or another on the standard layer of air provided. That is what you will have found on any ship you've been on. That, I guess that's good to know. It appears that the Brethren Lord's probe stopped transmitting whilst we were in flight. Gat informed its gathered troops through the communicator in its helmet, swiftly getting matters back on track. Nevertheless, it is still our first priority to locate it. Even without the signal, we should be able to pinpoint its location using our previous readings. Gat fell short of finishing its speech, not that any of the subsequent information would have added too much anyway. Some of its fellow Palanthiers joined the Lieutenant Commander in gazing into the nearby streets between the cubic buildings, meaning they too saw the procession of other alien figures passing by in the distance. It would appear that we are just in time, one of the other Palanthiers remarked. It won't be long before they're at their ceremony. The Lieutenant Commander took charge again. That is what we're going to do. We'll split into teams of 6 with 1 of 4 on the side. I shall lead the team tasked with locating the probe. My second in command, Gat paused, listening intently to a message it was receiving through its helmet. None of the surrounding insurgents could tell, but the Palanthea wasn't exactly happy with the instructions being transmitted to it. That being said, it wasn't one to disobey orders from on high. Returning its attention to those waiting with open ears for what it had to say, Gat disclosed, "It has been determined that the Mansins and Child are to be among those sent to the Records Hub." Very well, as I was saying, Fasay shall be leading that particular team. The Palanthea standing resolute next to Gat made itself known to the trio. In the meantime, Gat finished divvying up the remaining soldiers into the smaller battalions. There was probably a second between the Lieutenant Commander completing its task and the troops setting off in their requisite directions, as told to them by electronic maps on their arms. And all of a sudden, Noah, Philip, and Tony found themselves on the move again. Now that the adrenaline was dying just a little, it was possible for the Mansins to at least appreciate the awe instilled by their situation, of just where they were, so far from home, in more sense than one. Looking back at the cocoon looming over the horizon, Tony breathed, "It's magnificent." You know, for possible death machine, I mean. And from there, they have their climactic excursion upon this station of the cocoon. Why is it called the cocoon? What might happen? I mean, obviously, certain information you'll know already if you've read the preceding sections, but also what may happen. Could you see it coming? So as I say, that was kind of the last extracts that we're going to do for this live stream. You've got, if you go on to DominicHodgson.com, you've got sorry, I'm just looking at notification. You've got your the Celestial Coup sample extracts. You can read 4 other sections that weren't talked about today to read as well. But otherwise, to get the rest of the story, you will have to get the book itself, either in paperback or ebook forms. But also, if you haven't read the first 2 already, then I'd suggest getting those as well, since you might as well. It's a series, read them in order. The links would be in the description, but of course, again, if any of you were here for the beginning still, we had to restart the live stream because for some reason the first one wouldn't load. So I'm going to have to copy all the description over in the thumbnail and whatever. But if you don't want to click back on this, you've got, as I say, it's going to be in the descriptions of any other YouTube videos. You've got on Facebook, on Twitter, on Instagram. Okay, so Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram are all the Ragnarök Chronicles. Twitter, because I made that years ago and I don't want to change it, is at DEJ Hodgson. Again, all of the links and descriptions of videos, anyway, to all the other social medias, all the links are going to be there. If you know me personally, of course, you can ask. If you know me on Discord, it's going to be on certain servers that I posted it in. Alternatively, you can just search for the titles on Amazon itself, or Dominic. If you just search Dominic Hodgson, you quite possibly going to come up with other books as well, written by a dog handler. I think it's about dog behavior stuff. So if Ragnarök Chronicles or Gift of the Manson, The Archangels, Celestial Coup, any of those. If you search Celestial Coup, make sure that Amazon hasn't auto-corrected its Celestial Cup, as it seems to want to do, unless you want to buy cups as well, but also make sure you get the book. Once there, you can also find my author page. Just click on the Dominic Hodgson, that will show you a list of all the other ones as well. And then, of course, that will apply again in 3 months when book 4 comes out. But with all of that, just kind of the last section we'll talk about here today. Again, unless anyone has any questions they want to ask in the chat, again, just make sure it's an option if you want, or anyone else you want to get in contact. So I've talked about how after this I am going to be finishing off proofreading that Game of Thrones stuff. I've also, because okay, please say this is still in the right position. A few tabs goes down. Another thing that I've talked about before, especially if you have known me in person, is the fact that I like Doctor Who. And I've also mentioned before and previously that I'm part of a fan audio drama production, some of which, if people are still in the audience who were in earlier, also I now have voices in it as well. It's not, and none of it's out yet, but it will be coming out soon. I keep saying things keep happening behind the scenes, but it's coming out. But also beyond that, I also have my lofty aspirations of writing for the show itself, with me with my 15 to 18 years of franchise ideas, including spin-offs as well. But because I've been focusing on the book stuff, all of this, and YouTube videos and everything else, I haven't really had, I've rightfully not given myself the time to properly divulge back into the Doctor Who, my personal Doctor Who side of things of late. Instead, just when I have an idea of something, I just add it to notes. And I've also mentioned it was an Instagram post, how for whatever stupid reason, I prefer to leave notes and reminders rather than the actual notes app. But these notes are things I'm going to jot down. So by the second half of March, that is the next month, I want to be proofreading book 4 already, because each book takes me a little while to proofread, and this is the longest one. So to come out at the end of May, I really want to start proofreading it as early as possible. But give myself a couple of weeks to get back into my own personal stuff, including this, which is why, again, I have at least half a dozen notes like this, but this is the longest. I'm so hoping this shows up in any... Okay, you can't see anything on the screen itself, but if you just get an indication of me scrolling, this is one continuous note. Okay. There we go. That is miscellaneous ideas that aren't related to any of the existing episode ideas that I want to incorporate somewhere eventually. I say I have a half dozen things about that. That was the longest. It's going to be honestly really fun organizing that, literally just going through and say, okay, then put that here, put that here, put that here. I was going to say relaxing to actually get it done finally, because I've been wanting to do that for so long. But yeah, with that, I'll be writing some other scripts eventually, although that's after the book 4 is out and all of that's done, and I work out what I'm going to do with marketing beyond that. Tangent within the tangent. When it comes to marketing, I always say I'm bad at marketing. The Instagram account is doing better than I actually honestly would have expected when I first started, but still it's not a massively growing audience. So the problems as well with how to market sequels as opposed to a first book if people haven't really read the first book yet. I wanted to get these books out relatively expediently because they're more or less ready, hence every 3 months, so that if people do get into the series, they then don't have to wait for the next one to come around. That being said, there's also the flip side of that, which is that I release these sequels when people haven't got around to reading the first book yet. So if you do read them, first of all, as I say, it's mentioned at the back of the book as well, but leave an honest review on Amazon. Once you've finished it, you can be honest about it, so because that really helps. But also, if you've, having read it, think, actually, I know someone else who would like this, either personally or just people on the internet or whatever, tell them about it. Help spread the word, please. Because once all 4 are out, I'll try to do some marketing for the set as a first set in the franchise before taking then a bit more time to get onto the other stuff. But yeah, help spread the word, please. But yeah, so I'm getting onto that stuff. So once book 4 is out, I'll be trying to do some marketing work out how to do it for the whole series. But after that, I'll be doing some other script personal stuff, as well as trying to find actual jobs because still, while there's a little bit of money coming in from this, it's still not living wage or anything kind of like that. So I haven't really been focusing on looking for jobs at this point. I still need to because I'm coming up to my 2-year window out of university, so I'm running out of time with which I can use their careers help services. So I need to make use of those. Also, like I found one like by happenstance. I'm not particularly looking for them at the moment because I've been focusing on making sure all this gets done. But I happened upon a job opportunity a few weeks ago, which was for a ghostwriter for ebooks and audiobooks and stuff. It was really interesting. And annoyingly, by the time I then got my CV ready, because I've been focusing on this, my CV was out of date and needed polishing, whatever. Once I got that done, the job listing closed because I didn't find the listing when it was first put up. I must have found it like on the last day of that it was open, whatever. But so I mean, it was a very quick turnaround of emotions. But I don't know, those kind of things. Maybe what I'll try to look for. Not that I have to tell any creative who might be in the audience, but creative pursuits aren't the easiest or most guaranteed employment paths. But seeing as everything I like doing is just storytelling in some form or another, that's that kind of thing that I'll be trying to look for. So again, once book 4 is done, and in the end, again, in those first weeks of March, before I get on to book 4, as well as doing all my Doctor Who stuff, and also finally getting around to playing some video games that I've had since Christmas, some maybe even birthday last year that I just haven't had time to get around to yet. I'll finally get to play those as well. But as well as all that, I'll also try to search for stuff. But all things for the future. With that, I think talking about the future, I will move on to other things beyond this. I don't have really anything else more to say, but if you just give me a second, I'll just kind of give you your. Actually, no, I gave a précis before, but I didn't technically read the blurb. Okay, this is partially obscured by the watermark, but let's go for it. So again, just to make sure, and someone's just joined, it looks like, just as we're wrapping up. But just again, leave you with that taste again from the actual blurb, which you find on Amazon, whatever. Word is spreading across the stars. A peaceful regime is to be seized from within by a mysterious band of warriors. If this coup is successful, it could lead to a further resurgence in the wider multiversal conflict, earlier than even other aggressors would intend. As people rush to identify what exactly is being plotted, one sentiment remains consistent: believe in the revolution. Having returned to the present, Philip Quint and his friends find themselves missing an ally whilst being surrounded by potential new ones, as they otherwise now adapt to living in a grand abandoned house. Philip, however, and this is where the watermark obscures things, is no longer in complete control of himself, which, as a Manson, makes him a potential danger to the others. His companions, therefore, must make strides on their own, their latest endeavours taking them to uncover political agendas closer to home, lest the Brethren Lords force the teen to use his extraordinary powers against them. What can he do to regain their trust? As tensions rise across the different dimensions, the divisions between the ranks of both the group on Earth and indeed the Brethren Lords as well are worsening, meaning both are at risk of shattering if things continue as they are. Who's really pulling the strings behind this fervent series of events? What other beings are truly hiding in their midst? What ancient evil is secretly returning? One wrong move and everything could change. It's a line from earlier in the blurb, but I want to reiterate it and try to reiterate it in all the things. Originally, when I first planned out the whole of the Ragnarök Chronicles things, I would have like taglines for all of them, but that kind of didn't happen. However, if there was to be a tagline for this one, it's definitely, again, it's a line that's kind of repeated a couple of times in the book. Believe in the revolution. There's a ring to it, and it makes sense to kind of keep on trying to reinforce that sentiment. There, if we have no other comments, nothing else we want to say. Again, hopefully no one has tried to comment on the. Oh, well, I would have got an email if someone should. Would I? Oh, because it's a live chat. Interesting. I would have. But if hopefully no one has tried to comment on the previous live stream, I actually maybe should check that. Even though I left a I changed the title and I left in the description that there was a new link to go to. So hopefully no one has been commenting on this one. But let's have a no one's tried to comment on that one. Anyway, thank you for joining. If you do have any questions, anything you want to say in general, you can get in contact with me in various ways. As I've mentioned already, social media links are in the descriptions beneath all of them, as will be the links to buy the books as well, which I'll get in every packet system as well. Either way, thank you for joining. Hope you have a good rest of your day. And if you do indeed read this or its predecessors, Gift of the Manson and the Ark of Angels, I hope you do enjoy and let me know that you did.